You're listening to the Today's Eden podcast, episode 26. This is where the struggles are real, the callings are heavy, the kids are sticky. We come together because it takes a village, and this is your tribe. Thanks for listening to the Today's Eden podcast. Today I'm talking with Chrissy Powers, and she is a mama, a marriage and family therapist, photographer, and also blogger, Instagrammer. She's a jack of all trades, and we get down and dirty and talking all things motherhood, like colic, working from home, going to counseling, finding community over competition, the movie Bad Moms, and anxiety stemmed from a scary moment where her child went missing. I'm so pumped to have Chrissy on. Let's get to the episode. Hey, Chrissy, thanks for being on the podcast with me today. I'm so excited to talk to you about motherhood and basically the whole deal, like what is included in the package of motherhood today. And just kind of chew on that and just talk.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here.
So before we get into all that good stuff and the messy stuff, tell us a little bit about who you are, what life kind of looks like for you right now, just some details.
Okay. So I'm Chrissy Powers, and I am a mother of two little boys. Waylon is 5 and Zeke is 20 months, and married to Sam Powers. We got married about 7 years ago. Yeah, 7 years last February. I am a marriage and family therapist, licensed, I should say licensed, because I work really hard for that. And I still have this like creative side of me. I always like preface it by saying like my BA was in art, and then I went back to school and got my master's in psychology because I really wanted to work with people, especially women. And then after I became a mom, that creative spark in me just like was reignited. And I like, for some reason, this thing had in my mind that I wanted to take really good pictures of my kids.
Yeah.
So I bought a digital camera, and I just learned how to use that camera really well, I feel like. And then started taking pictures of my kids. And then a friend was like, hey, let's start a blog together. And then I was like, what's blogging? So we started a blog together, which incidentally didn't work out. It was just too hard for being moms and having the same blog. But I loved it. I just took it and ran with it and just love blogging. I feel like I had a space where I could combine everything that I loved, meaning like writing about therapy or relationships or parenting. And then I had a place as well to put up my photos. So I was like, and then, be creative. Like I could just showcase like a DIY or like a cute outfit, but also then write about something like, anxiety and motherhood. And so I really felt like it was just a combination for me of everything that I love. And I'm like, wow, I kind of feel like, God, you brought something into my life that was just like me and my niche. So that is, that's what I do. I still try to everything out, which I can't. So I can't figure it all out, but I'm learning as I go. And what life looks like for me right now is like lots of being busy, and then like trying to learn the balance of like when to not be busy, like when to say no and make just time to like be with my family. Because I have a hard time with that, because I love being productive. And I love meeting people and having opportunities. So for me right now, life is learning that like balance of like, it's okay to be busy, and it's okay to hustle and have work and to love it. But then also, when you're married and you have children, you have to think of them too. So I'm learning the balance of slowing down for them at maybe it's just certain times a day. Maybe it's like a certain week where I'm like, okay, I need to say no to more things.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of what life looks like right now for me.
Don't you feel like when you sit down, like when you decide you're like, okay, I'm not going to do anything between 10 and 1, then the whole time you're sitting there, you're like, I could be doing, like there's things I could be doing, or you feel, and I feel like that's where that like mom guilt comes in, where we start to think like we should either be folding laundry, or if you have a side hustle, you want to be like for you, it'd be like blogging or working on future posts to come out. And
Totally. And there, yeah, that's the balance of it is like sometimes my oldest, he like, in the morning loves to sit and watch a show and he's like, Mom, you can sit with me on the couch. And so I know I need to do that. And he loves physical touch and just affection. So I'm like, okay, that's really important to do that. And sometimes he'll say, Mom, you can bring your computer on the couch
Aw.
and do your work. And I'm like, should I feel bad about that?
Yeah.
Or should I feel like it's okay because he knows that moms can have jobs too. So I feel like I often go to bed feeling guilty. Like, did I give them enough undivided attention today? And I take that as like a signal for me that maybe the next day just be more aware of it. But then also I don't want to beat myself up for like maybe one time having to sit on the couch with my computer to edit photos because mom's hustling, and if he's watching TV, that might be a good time because we're both doing our thing. So I think it's a give and take. I think it's not every day has to be perfect. Not every day has to be like, I don't know, that slow motherhood. It's like a new movement
Yeah.
that I like it and I want to be that, but I can't always be like that because sometimes I do have to work or meet a deadline. So yeah, I think it's like being gracious with yourself and then also, just trying to be aware of what really matters.
Yeah. Have you ever had a struggle with like that negative self-talk we can sometimes do to ourselves when it comes to working? Like, I feel like in motherhood, we just compare ourselves a lot. And so there's like this invisible, I don't know, comparison between like stay-at-home moms and working moms. And so I feel like for me, even though I'm at home and I'm still working from home, like sometimes there's still that like internal struggle of like, what should I be doing? Or is this the right thing for me to be doing?
Totally, because I grew up and my mom was a, fully stay-at-home mom and I loved it. Like I found so much safety in that. And so when I became a mom, it was like so important for me. I felt like to be there for my kids because I felt like I wanted to give them that. And I know a lot of moms, have to work 9 to 5 jobs. And I think their children are going to be totally fine too, because I think what matters is the love that you have for your children and how you show them that. But I feel like we live in such a different age where I sometimes think, or I say to my mom, I'm like, gosh, it must have been so nice. You just had like a phone with a cord attached to the wall. Like you didn't have a phone in your hand all the time. Like you didn't have that temptation or that pull.
Yeah.
And, I'm sure they had other things, but like sometimes I do envy that these temptations just didn't exist then. But then I'm like, okay, it's just kind of pointless to go back in time and think about that because my children aren't living my childhood. They're living their childhood and they're living in a complete different age and they're going to have to learn how to balance these devices and time and work and family as well. So it's like, okay, well, maybe they will learn through our example as like working moms or working stay-at-home moms because that's kind of what I feel like I am.
Yeah.
Yeah, working stay-at-home mom where it's like it is definitely hard. I do struggle sometimes with that negative self-talk of like, okay, what am I even doing? What am I like? I like to think I'm providing. And like, I always think of that Proverbs 31:30 woman. And I'm like, that's what I want to be, the woman that like gets up early, although I don't, I don't get up too early unless I have to. But, and it's just, once I just want to provide for my family so much, and give them, a wonderful childhood. So I think that's where that comes from. And I think that negative self-talk, you just have to bring it back to, did I show my child enough love? Do they know they're loved? What's my relationship with them like? And overall, it's pretty good,
Yeah.
That's what you have to come back to. And if it's not, if the relationship is struggling, then that's when you need to figure out, what would strengthen this relationship? Maybe it is more one-on-one time with them, or maybe it is just like sitting next to them and watching the show they like.
Yeah, and I feel like the working stay-at-home mom, like that lifestyle is a whole nother beast in and of itself. So you have like the stay-at-home mom, the working mom, and then the working stay-at-home mom.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you're either at home with your kids and you're focusing on them and, you might have a few things for yourself to do or for the family or for, some other pursuit outside of that. Or you go to a place of work outside of the home and you're not distracted by your kids while you're working. But when you're working from home, then you are distracted from your kids
Yep.
while you're working. And because you're surrounded by them, you feel that guilt constantly that, because they're there, that you should be engaging with them. Versus I feel like when you're, working mom in an office, you still have that guilt that you just want to be with them. But now when you're a working stay-at-home mom, you have that guilt that I should be engaging with them because they're 10 feet from me.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that, like, going back to having a different childhood than my children, I think that's where maybe the guilt comes from because we didn't see that a lot growing up.
Yeah.
And now my husband will even say to my son, mommy's working right now, even though I'll be in the room. Like, I might have to have the computer open. So yeah, my husband will even say mommy's working right now. And that used to irk me so badly. I used to get so mad at him for saying, like, don't say that. I'm here. I'm present. I'll be there for them anytime. I was like, I don't want him to think I'm not available for him.
Yeah.
And I will, obviously drop anything, well, if they need me, or if he's like, Mom, I really want you to read me a book before bed, then absolutely. But sometimes it is nice to have your partner, or even myself, to be able to say, no, mommy's working right now. I just need 5 minutes. So yeah, I'm just kind of teaching them that this is what work looks like for mom.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and I
yeah.
think they get it. And I totally agree with your statement saying that, like, really, if they're getting all the love and affection that they need and they know you're coming from a good place, then that means more to them than what you think it looks like of you sitting working next to them. I felt like we put like the worst thoughts into our heads about everything that we're doing because we're holding ourselves to like this unreachable standard. And, we want to be everything for everybody, especially our kids. And yeah, it's just a crazy balance that I don't even know if it ever does get in like an equal balance. It's like a give and take, I feel like, constantly.
Totally. Yeah. I don't even like the word balance anymore because you feel like you have it one day and then the next day you're like, wait a minute, where did it go? Like, what am I doing? So yeah, I definitely want to write a piece on like balance is a unicorn because it's like this mythical thing that we're all looking for. And it's like, you can have it one day and then the next day situations or circumstances change and you got to figure it out again. And that's why I say like we need to have a little bit more grace with ourselves. Because I believe that if you are trying to find balance, then you're probably doing a good job. Like just you're probably aware enough about your family and your kids and your life. And that's a good thing.
Yeah, just the pursuit of balance, not that you're actually achieving. I feel like that's kind of the theme in all areas. Like if you're pursuing, personal development or getting better in yourself or pursuing a better relationship with your faith or whatever it is, that I feel like just the pursuit in itself makes you have a better personal life, better relationships, better self-love, like et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that the biggest shocker in marriage is like how much becoming more than just a couple changes things. And I know that you've blogged a little bit about this, but you and your husband have small kiddos, like you said, 5 and 20 months. And so did that like totally rock your guys' world, or was that not even like an issue you just kind of rolled with?
No, it definitely rocked our world. Not like we weren't ready. Well, I don't know. I'm like, is anyone ever really ready to be a parent? We wanted children, so they were definitely planned. But I feel like marriage is definitely a give and take, but it was like, I was ready before him to have children, and I kind of had to talk him into it a little bit. Like, this is, my biological clock is ticking, babe. Like, we want children. We better try now. And we got pregnant right away. And, it was always something that we wanted, and we're so excited and felt actually really blessed to be able to get pregnant right away. Um, but yeah, I mean, it was really hard. Waylon had colic for 5 months, and I wrote about that actually. And while writing it, I realized like those 5 months of colic, we actually really were a good team. Like, they were super stressful, and I'm sure we had plenty of fights. But when I recall and look back on it, I'm like, I just remember like being like a warrior with him, like just handing Waylon off, and we would listen to heavy metal while the vacuum was playing, while we're like bouncing on an exercise ball. And I'm like, okay, we were like soldiers together. And we talk about it now with like almost like a fondness, like we really were a team together on that.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like maybe it was like other things in life, like that make parenting really hard, finances and work,
Mm-hmm.
and then figuring out and paying for healthcare and stuff like that. It's like all of that, those little stresses, I feel like sometimes in marriage make parenting harder, because you're already like kind of stressed out and heightened. So it's easy to fight over other little things like parenting issues. But yeah, we've definitely had to, talk about how we're going to parent. If we, believe in this or that, or if we have to talk about those issues. And for the most part, we are definitely on the same page. But there are moments where, we have to discuss things and talk about how we want to raise our children. So yeah, it's definitely not easy, but I feel like it's probably the number one thing that's made our marriage work is having children.
So I want to know about colic because, and this is so random, and I'm like going off on a whole different area, but I'm curious because neither of my kids had colic, but I know that other mom friends of mine and other people that I know, they're either one of their children had colic or something, but it like when they talk about it, it's like it's messing you up. Like,
Yeah.
and so how did you guys deal with having young ones? Did both of your kids have colic or just one?
No, and that's actually how I talked Sam into number two, because I was like, it couldn't be worse. And even if it was, we've already been there. We know how to do it. Like, so, yeah, Zeke was completely different as a baby. It was just amazing and refreshing. But, yeah, no, colic was, gnarly. Definitely, definitely rocked us. I feel like it was because Waylon was born 3 weeks early, and so I know his digestive tract wasn't fully developed. Doctors can never really tell you why it happens, because it can happen to a full-term baby. Um, but yeah, it was just so heartbreaking to see my baby, my firstborn child, in so much pain, especially after he ate. Um, and I feel like as a new mom, I was just like, is this how it is? Like, is this how every baby is? Like, how do people have more children? I was like, this is insane. So we tried everything. We did, we went to chiropractic care. I think we tried like warm tummy compresses and lots of swaddles, and then eventually had to put him on like a baby Zantac because he had acid reflux, which is really common, that goes hand in hand with colic. Um, and then, but it was like witching hour from like 4 to 8 every night, just screaming nonstop. And the best thing that really helped us was just family and friends that would come and help. And like I went and stayed with my parents that summer for a couple weeks, and I just remember family being around, and they were like, I've got him, I'll take him. And like they would just swaddle him up, and we would all take turns like finding positions that would make him feel good. And like I look back on that too now with like this fondness of like how I don't know, maybe it's just God's love, just showing like that even in a hard time, there are people there that love you and want to help you. And we all just felt so bad for him, even though it was like messing with our brains.
Yeah.
Like we were, it's crazy. We can understand how people can lose it. And, at the same time, you have that compassion for your baby that's in so much pain. That my number one, like advice for any mom dealing with colic is to reach out to people and to find someone that's dealt with it or going through it. I had a friend that had a baby like 6 months before me, and she'd just gotten through it with her son. And so that was really the only thing that gave me encouragement, was I could just see that like there was light at the end of the tunnel. She had gotten through it, and like, we would talk about different things that work, because there are little things that work here and there, but it's basically time. You got to give your baby time to grow out of it.
Well, that's awesome that you guys kind of warriored through that and came together as a couple. Has it always been easy for you guys to kind of unite in parenting?
No, honestly. I don't think
It
it's
sounded
ever
so
been
good though.
easy. I don't think it's ever been easy for us to come together and unite. I think someday, I always envision us as a couple in their 50s, and we'll be like, yes, we finally figured it out. We finally get it. We get each other. Yeah, we're just both really headstrong people. So it's never been easy, but I feel like our foundation is the same. And that's what really matters, because it's like, obviously we both want the same things for our children. And we both trust God, and we both love each other, and we know we're in it for the long haul. So I feel like those foundational, like, key things are what make it work, and what ultimately help us figure stuff out. But getting there has never been easy. So there are many nights where we're up just talking things through, and you know, praying about stuff, and even going to counseling. We've been to counseling many times to help figure out life and relationships and parenting too. So that's helped as well.
And that's like super interesting to me, because you're you're a marriage therapist, right? And
Yeah,
so
marriage and family therapist.
so
Yeah.
how does that fit? Like, how does that play into your guys' marriage? Like, are you the one that can see things a little bit more clearly or communicate more clearly, or is it totally different when it comes to your own relationships?
It's so funny because marriage, even though you're a marriage and family therapist, it's like I cannot use any of the tools that I know that I can give someone else.
What?
It's different. It's so hard to do. It's so hard when you're in it to like,
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes the tools will come after, but it's like, when you're really in it, it's hard to not react to things that upset you and to be like a therapist in your own relationship. But I feel like being a mom and a therapist, I feel like that might give me a little bit more, I don't know, what's the word, like perspective on raising children, because of, I have seen a lot of children come in with issues, and I realize like, okay, this comes from that, or this comes from this. And so sharing that with my husband, like, well, I don't want our son to be ashamed of his body, or, like, so I think that we should do this, this, and this. And then he'll come back with like, well, I'm a man, and this is what it feels like to be a man. And I'm like, okay, that's good to know, because I didn't know that. Like, I'm not a man. So I feel like he does respect the fact that I know what I know from, whatever, being a therapist. But then at the same time, I do have to respect the fact that he is a father, and that he knows things that I don't know. And I think overall, though, more than just being a therapist, it's just that I'm the mom, and I'm home with them most of the day. And I feel like I get to see the ins and outs a little bit more. So I think he respects that a little bit more. That carries way more weight than being a therapist. So
That's awesome,
yeah.
though. That ability to see, to respect each other's knowledge. And because I feel like sometimes that can be a stumbling block. And I know that, sometimes when I give my husband unsolicited advice, it is not wanted, but having the like as a whole, being able to just respect each other's opinions. And that is like super helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. And really, that's just the main thing I feel like in a relationship is respecting each other's opinions. And it doesn't happen all the time. And a lot of times it's like, oh, wait, I need to go back and I need to remind myself like he's got his own opinion and that's okay.
Yeah.
It comes from his own experience. So
Yeah.
yeah.
But that makes so much sense about, not being able to use your therapy skills in your own marriage. Cause I feel like I don't
Yeah.
know. I feel like that's or maybe not everybody, but for me growing up, I could always tell my friends like, don't date that guy. This is what's wrong in your
Yeah.
relationship. This is what you need to do. But then my own personal life, I couldn't figure it out like for the life of me. I was always a person that everybody would go to for advice, but then I would never follow my own advice. Like
Yeah.
even now my husband's like, "Have you listened to your own podcast lately?" And I'm like, I'm like, "Okay, thanks, babe.
Yes.
Way to go."
That's hilarious. Yeah, I know I can like write something inspirational on my blog and be like, okay, I need to go back and read that and follow my own advice because I do that often too.
Right. And but don't you feel like some of the things that you write, like when I blog or usually when I podcast, I say things that sound super great and super inspirational sometimes, or like very positive or whatever. And most of the time it comes from having learned it like previously,
Oh,
and then regurgitating it for myself. But then it just
yeah.
happens that I have a bunch of people listening to this podcast or reading my blog, and so it's like I'm telling them, but really I'm writing it or telling it for me.
Yeah, I would say almost 100% of the time I'm writing something that I've learned recently. I just recently wrote a piece for the Every Girl blog that will be up, I think, in like a week, but it was through like a year, this whole last year
Uh-huh.
of learning about female competition and dealing with it.
Mm,
And it was, the piece is about how to celebrate other people's successes
yeah.
and in turn that will help you grow in whatever you're doing in life. Um, and kind of, finding community over competition.
Yeah.
Uh, and I feel like that's always what I strive for. And I love being in community more than anything. But at the same time, there is a part of me that feels a little threatened when someone else like succeeds. And I'm like, oh, I got to look at that in myself and figure out where does this come from? And, I don't like that in me. And so I really dove deep the last year and did some research and found some really great wisdom on it. And that's where that piece came from. It was like learning, I feel like, through my own experience of how can I love and accept and celebrate other people, other women when they succeed
Mm.
and and not feel like, oh, that's taking away from a piece of my pie because it's not.
Yeah.
So,
How
yeah.
have you been able to kind of change your perspective on that from thinking that, that kind of mindset of, oh, they're taking a piece from my pie, but then looking at it more as community, as like if one succeeds, like that's great.
Yeah, that's good for us all. Um, just a little piece from the article was about like neuroplasticity in the brain, meaning like the brain has the ability to change. So like when we have negative thoughts, recognize them and then ask yourself where do they come from, and then change that negative thought to a positive one. And the more we do that, the more our brain can actually change, and then the thoughts that we have might not necessarily be a threatening one when someone else succeeds. And that's the goal eventually, is to be like, wow, that's amazing. She's doing so well, or she started her podcast, or
Mm-hmm.
she started her blog and it looks so great. And like, I'm so happy for her. And, that doesn't mean I can't do it. Like, so I feel like the self-talk will change when you change the negative thinking. Um, because literally what you're doing is changing your brain. You're changing the pathways in your brain. And when you think about that, it's like pretty amazing. I'm like, okay, God, you made the brain so amazing. And, but it's hard because when you tell yourself stories for years, they become ingrained in your brain. And so that's why I feel like the key first step is to recognize it. So like I like to imagine like red flags going off. So like when I have this negative thought that I don't like, then I like kind of imagine like a red flag and I see it and I'm like, oh, okay, there's that. There's that in me that I don't like or I don't want there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I go in and I'm like, okay, where does that come from? Oh, yeah, that comes from like that time in high school when so and so said this to me and it just really impacted me and or really upset me. And then I go in and think, okay, like what's the truth? Okay, the truth is that she's doing awesome and that's exciting because I can do awesome too, and I can learn from maybe I can learn something from what they're doing.
Yeah.
And maybe um yeah, yeah, maybe that is out there for me too because there is an endless piece
Mm-hmm.
of joy or endless amounts of creativity out there too. So I like to remind myself those kind of positive affirmations.
Yeah, I think in the past year I've kind of learned the same thing too, is trying to teach or remind myself that my gifts and other people's gifts are totally different and we were all given our own individual gifts. So if I have, the gift of whatever, I don't know, like communication or something. And then, but my friend, her house always looks like a Pinterest house. Like, well, maybe that's not my gift and that's great for her. And maybe I should have her come decorate my house. But I
Yeah.
don't need to get down on myself because my house doesn't look like hers because that's not my
Yeah,
gift.
exactly. Yeah, for the longest time I had a hard time with like cooking because that's just not my gift and I finally had to cook. I found so much freedom in saying like I just don't cook and I don't bake and that's okay. I don't have to. I just felt like I was like less of a woman or less of a mother because
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't always, I don't bake home cooked meals all the time. My husband does. He's great at it. And I'm like, that's his gifting. And yeah, I think that there's a little bit of freedom too in saying that like this is where I thrive and this is where I'm good at. And I don't have to be good at everything or like that person in that way.
Yeah, this
But
this
yeah.
conversation totally reminds me of that movie Bad Moms. Have you seen that?
My gosh, I was just talking to someone about it last night. It's so
Oh
funny.
my gosh, that's like the best movie ever. But then you have like the mom who like never bakes, and so she brings who I think it was Mila Kunis's character, right? I think where
Yeah.
she brought like cupcakes that were pre-bought, and so she just took them out of the container and like put them on a plate, and the moms are walking by like, oh my gosh, are those not gluten free or something
Yeah.
like that? And oh my gosh, that movie is like
Yeah.
I just love that movie. I'm like, yes, these women
Yeah.
those are my people.
Yeah, I know. I think it's hard to, we live in a day and age where it's like, okay, that's, gluten-free, sugar-free, like all natural organic products. And it's like, yeah, that's a full-time job, just like making your whole house organic or
Yeah.
making
Oh yeah,
everything
you're
gluten-free.
preaching. Yeah, my daughter can't have she can't have gluten, dairy, or eggs.
Yeah,
And
that's
so,
hard.
yeah, and so, and I'm the same way. I can't have gluten. So that initially it was like, like really overwhelming to learn how to cook a whole different way and to do everything a whole different way. But it's so funny because I still, like people who don't know that we do it for a reason, that's how it looks, is that like, oh my gosh, like,
Right.
and so it's so funny. Like I find the humor in it and I think it's funny, and I am that mom, and at our school everybody
Yeah.
knows me as like that mom, and it's kind of like a joke, and I'm totally cool with it. But yeah, it's how the extremes of it though are, it just makes it hard to motherhood when you can't like unite in,
Mhm.
and like you said, being community over competition.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely like that's your thing that you have to do obviously for your health and sometimes you have to um remind yourself that it's like okay, this is what I'm choosing to um put more of my effort towards and it's okay that I don't like excel in this area
Yeah.
or yeah, like it's okay my house doesn't look like Pinterest right now.
Yeah, I try, but mine just, I think I've gotten to a place where I'm like, you know what? this might be as good as it gets, and I'm proud of that. Like this,
Yes.
but
Proud of that one corner that looks
yeah,
really good.
then all of my Instagram photos will be from because yeah,
Exactly. I was just gonna say, like Pinterest and Instagram, remember that's just one section of someone's house or
hmm
one, you don't know what's beyond the border.
yeah.
So,
I love when there's moms who post and they show like a before and after. Like this is what this is what my picture looks like. But if I showed you the whole room of where
mm.
this picture was taken, you would notice there's piles of mess like on each side.
Oh, that's so funny. Yesterday, I love Instagram stories for that
Yes.
fact because I was like, I like to post really pretty pictures, but because that's more of like the art side for
Mm-hmm.
me is like, okay, this is like my gallery, my magazine, and I love to make it look beautiful. But then the story part is just my favorite part of Instagram now because yesterday I posted what our house looked like when we leave the house, and I just like did a whole scan of the room, and I got so many messages back saying, "Thank you for this. I thought we were the only ones. Like that's what our house looks like too." And I'm like, "Yeah, no, the key is like it looks like this during the day, and then right before everybody goes to bed, we clean it up." So,
Yeah, because there is no point in trying to pick that mess up in the middle of the
yeah,
day when
no, especially
tornadoes
when
are
you
going
have
to come through at any moment. And
exactly. Yeah.
so, do you have
Hmm.
any like big lessons or takeaways from your profession in therapy that kind of you were able to apply to, raising kids or your marriage that you feel like gave you extreme insight?
Hmm. From therapy or
Yeah.
from my degree,
Yeah.
the word that sticks out for me would be empathy.
Mm.
Um, because as a therapist, that is like your number one goal in like doing therapy with someone is to have empathy. And I had a professor describe it to me. The best way that I've heard was that empathy is it's not sympathy because sympathy is feeling sorry for someone, but empathy is feeling with someone.
Mm.
And empathy, he said, is like having one foot in someone else's world and one foot in yours because you're not them. So you don't know exactly how they're feeling, but you can try and you can step into their world and try to understand them. And I loved it. It was just a beautiful image for me. This was like before I was even married when I had heard that. And then when I got married and had children, it's, obviously a lot harder to have empathy um, every day for the people in your life. And sometimes, I mean, it's sad, but it's sometimes harder to have empathy for the people that are closest to you.
Yeah.
Um, and but that's been the biggest thing that I feel like, maybe God's been teaching me is to have empathy first with my, marriage for my husband,
Mm.
to understand what he's going through. Um, Meaning like listen more and don't always come back with an answer, which is what I struggle with.
Yes.
I always want to fix it. Like sometimes we swap roles in that way. Usually it's the man that just wants to fix things, but it's like for in our marriage, I'm like, well, let's do this and let's do that and let's fix it. And he's like, no, I just want you to listen to me. So, yeah, meaning to have empathy with for my husband. And then I feel like it comes really easy with my children. Um, but sometimes when when the whining is not constant and the tantrums are happening with more frequency, that's when it gets harder to have empathy. And I feel like patience is, what it looks like
Mm-hmm.
on the outside, but empathy is um, more of like when you think, okay, what is my child going through right now? What do they need? Like,
Mm-hmm.
are they really just trying to make my life miserable? No, probably not. They're feeling something right now. Like, and I think that helped us a lot with like the colic even and with the tantrums and in the toddler years with Waylon, I know, and now Zeke, like to know that like, okay, they're little people that are feeling lots of things and that must be really hard for them. And so that's where I feel like it's easier for me to have patience with them. And it has helped me greatly to be like, what is my child going through right now? Let me kind of investigate and understand them. I want them to know that I am like here for them. And so what that looks like in motherhood for me is like when my son or one of them is crying or screaming and it like looks like they're having a tantrum on the outside, and you just want to be like, go to your room
Yeah.
or you're going to get a spanking or whatever, whatever kind of punishment you're like at your wit's end sort of punishment,
Right.
that's yell out the threats and things. And what it looks like in that moment to have empathy is to sit, to be quiet with them, even if they're not being quiet, and to maybe look them in the eye. For me and my son, Waylon, it's like maybe to like hold him because he wants that. He needs me to calm him down, and to say breathe. Like I said, breathe, and then I say like, wow, like it looks like you're having a really hard time right now. What's going on?
Mm-hmm.
Like so, acknowledging that he has a lot of feelings, and then asking like, what's going on? That's empathy for me in motherhood. So.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I noticed you just said like you're explaining to him basically what he's feeling with in a way that's like not telling him um what he's feeling, if that if that makes sense. Like, but
Yeah, exactly.
we had I was in like a Bible study with a group of women, and one of the girls was going to, I think she was getting her license in like play therapy for children. And
Hmm.
so for one of her assignments, she had to have like a mock session with a child that she didn't know. And so she knew I had a toddler. And so she asked if she could come over and, have like a little session with him. And I noticed like throughout the whole time that she was here, whenever he did something, she would tell him like basically what
Hmm.
he just did, or kind of like make him aware of the things that he was
Yeah.
doing or the things that he was feeling.
Yes, kids love that. I learned that too, like in play therapy. One of the main things is to narrate, like play what they're doing,
Mm-hmm.
and and they love it. And I think they love it maybe because they feel that's to them. It's the signal that you are with them
Mm-hmm.
and that you're seeing them and hearing them and understanding them.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we all want. But yeah, and it's hard as parents and adults to look at children and understand that sometimes because it looks like they're out of control or they're just little people and they don't know anything. But it's like, no, they're people and they have feelings and emotions. And, sometimes we want to just yell out, the idle threat of punishment or, like come up with the most extreme punishment in our head.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, no, what you really need is like to sit in that moment with them and to allow them to calm down, um, or remove them from the situation. That's the other way to deal with tantrums, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There have been many times where I text my husband in the middle of the day or, and I'm like, when you come home, the children are probably going to be duct taped to the wall. Of course, I would never do that. So don't call CPS on me, anybody who's listening. But like,
Yeah.
but I mean, for me, sometimes it's better for me to like joke about the situation, even if I have to send my husband a text and like, I am going to, put your kids outside or, sell your kids to the neighbor or something like that. Or
Yeah.
that. And then like he texts me something funny back. And that kind of helps me to laugh about it and get out of my head about, the
Yeah.
the stress of it all or whatever.
Oh, totally. Yeah, there are many, many texts I've sent like that too, where I'm like, okay, I'm out of patience. I can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
You need tag team. You're it.
Yeah. Yep.
Come home.
That's what we
So,
say all the
yeah.
time. I'm like, oh, you're up, your turn.
Yep. Yeah. So anyone who's listening, don't feel like you have to do that all the time because like if you're depleted, it's very hard to have empathy.
Oh yeah.
I've learned that. So yeah, if you need a break, if you need a breather, there's no shame in asking for that. So
Or going to your closet and eating chocolate.
exactly. Or doing that if your husband's gone for a while.
That's right.
Yeah.
So you did blog a little bit about anxiety, and so I wanted to ask you a few questions about that and like where you thought your anxiety stemmed from.
Yes. Okay. Oh, I'll try to get through this without crying.
Oh,
I don't know, it's just a real, I'm definitely not afraid to talk about it. I want people to know, especially mothers, that anxiety is real and you're not alone. I never had anxiety before I had children. Um, and I had some complications with Waylon. 29 weeks, I had like a placenta abruption. And I had to be on bed rest from then on out. And that was like the first time I had felt like, oh, I could lose my child, and that feeling of, wow, what would that do to me?
Yeah.
Um, and that was scary. If I had to go through that again now, I probably would have way more anxiety about it because now I know exactly what I would be losing. But I had a particular incident when Waylon was like 18 months old. Um, we went to visit my parents at my home church, and he was so fast. Like I always like disclaim it by saying like I was right behind him, and he was so fast. He ran around the corner, and I was like right behind him, but I turned the corner and he was gone. And we looked all around the church, and like it was after church, and so they had gotten everybody that was around to look for him, and then by that time it got to the scary point where you're like, okay, like 10 minutes have gone by, like where's my toddler?
Yeah.
Um, and I was just very frightened to even go look in the street. Um, and then someone, it was a really bad case of mistaken identity, but a mother went out and asked these little boys out front that were playing, like if they had seen this boy, and they said, oh yeah, a man took him in his car. And so she was panicked and came back and had said that. And I lost my mind, literally lost my mind. And I was just like a primal woman wailing and screaming because I had thought my son was kidnapped. And so the police were called, and luckily a few minutes later they had found him. They saw his little feet behind this door, and he had went into this copy room and shut the door, and it locked automatically behind him. But someone saw his feet, and I just remember my mom saying, okay, Chrissy, he's here. We found him. And oh my gosh, like, oh, like I just, going back there is a bad place to go back to. But that was the first moment like that I realized I could lose my child.
Yeah.
And just, like hugging him, and going back there. Yeah. It's like really hard to, but I can pinpoint now where the anxiety comes from. So it is a mixture of PTSD for sure. But through that anxiety, it just grew, and it spread to other things like, a fear of flying, or like a fear of like, what do people think of me? Or like, it just totally generalized from there. And so I can pinpoint exactly where it came from. And it all is the fear that I will lose my child, or in essence, I will lose myself. And it's been a journey to like figure out how to get through it, how to deal with it, and then how to live differently. Because even though it might be there in my life for the rest of my life, I don't want to live with, I don't want to like white knuckle it through life. And I feel like God's really been teaching me that he loves my children more than I do. And that is like a thought that has helped me when I get anxious at the park, because like I can't see my kid for a second. Then I do have to like remind myself to breathe, and like everything's okay, and like, God loves my children more than he loves me, or more than I do. Not more than he loves me. He loves me. I was just thinking about recently, I had to fly to Hawaii to be with my sister because her youngest went into cardiac arrest, and it was such a scary time. And I put myself in her shoes, and like, the panic and the anxiety, like just waves of it came back, but I wanted to be there for her. And Sam said, go and be there for her. And so I left him with the boys, and they were totally fine. But, of course, me and my mom anxiety, like, and hopping on an airplane by myself was like really huge. And then just being away from them, like having this ocean separating us, was like really anxiety ridden. But overall, I kept hearing God say to me, like, I'm good, and I've got this, and I'm good. And it literally was such an amazing time to be over there, because I saw him work in ways that I had never seen him work before. Like, he healed my nephew, and I saw the church, and like literally saw people from the church, like as his arms wrapping us with prayer and food and love and comfort and money and help. And it was like his it was like a lesson for me, I feel like, of God, like, this is me, I'm good.
Mm.
And I feel like that's been the most helpful for me in my anxiety is like I tell myself that when anxiety pops up, I tell myself, okay, like this is okay. Like it's anxiety. It's just anxiety. It doesn't mean that the worst is going to happen. And then I go back to the fact that he's a good father.
Yeah.
And that's been the most help for me. But I'm definitely a big proponent on therapy. And even if you have to do medication, there are times where I've had to go on medication to help myself to feel more grounded, to just have more balance, like mentally more like, balance.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's where definitely anxiety and motherhood. I'm like, wow, no one tells you when you have a
No.
child.
And the
Like, keep
yeah.
anxiety.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It's so well, and I mean, I don't holy cow. Yeah, when you were telling me that like the woman came back or like the kid said that my
Yeah.
stomach just like dropped, because obviously I didn't know the ending of the story and I'm like, oh no. So I didn't know where it was going to go. And I just
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
was like, oh my gosh. But I don't remember which kid it was, but one of my kids I lost in Target, and I just like turned around for a second and then they were gone. And I was like freaking out. And I mean, like just the thought of, okay, did somebody take them? Did they run outside the building? If I run outside the building, like, am I going to miss them? Are they going to, like, you never realize how much you love something until you have kids. And it's like an insane feeling to have no control over
Yes.
their life basically, or their survival. I don't know. But, and then I remember finding them and I was just like bawling like in the middle of
Yes.
Target because I was like it was like because you just go from like freaking high your emotion just like peaks to where it's like I will turn over every single aisle in this place like you're
Oh,
like in mom mode and then to have that all erased in a second, your kid back in your arms, you're just like
yeah.
relieved. And oh my gosh, it's so
Nothing else
crazy.
matters. Nothing else
Yeah.
matters. You're just like, okay, that puts it all in perspective.
Yeah.
My children are here and they're safe and they're healthy. And yeah, I think every day to it like helps me put things in perspective and just really soak in that like my kids are okay and they're here. And so many parents, have kids in the hospital or,
Mm-hmm.
have maybe even lost a child, like whether miscarriage or, you name it. But yeah, I think it does. It really put things in perspective for me of like um, just how precious it is to be like a mother. And my children mean so much to me. But then I do know that it's like, okay, I cannot um, like have the idol of control.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I don't know where that came from. It was like it has been an idol,
Yeah.
and it's because I want to control everything and I want to know that everything's going to be okay, and that's not guaranteed in this life. And the only way that I know I'm going to get through this life is by trusting in a good God um, that wants me to have a good life. And I have so many friends that or a few good friends that I really divulge, this kind of information to, and they will just tell me straight, like, that's not what God wants for you. You know that He's got good things for you, and that helps too to be able to talk to your mom friends about those crazy weird anxieties
Mm-hmm.
and all that stuff. So you definitely, I would say be open about it. If you're struggling with anxiety, like don't be afraid to talk about it, whether it's with your mom group of friends or in a Bible study or in a Facebook group or with a therapist. Like definitely be open and talk about it because you're not alone.
What have you learned this far about about overcoming anxiety at this phase in your life now?
Um, I've learned that it might always be there. Um, and that's okay because it doesn't mean it's always going to be bad.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's a certain therapy I learned in grad school called acceptance and commitment therapy. And it's like so funny because it sounds counterintuitive, but you're supposed to accept the things in your life that you don't like anxiety or depression. And in turn, the idea is that the more you accept it, the more or the less it will affect you in life. So anxiety sometimes for me is like panic. It feels like panic or panic disorder and um and for me the best thing to do in that moment when I feel it is to say like, okay, there it is. Not, oh my gosh, there it is. I'm going to die and everything is going to collapse around me and my children are going to be kidnapped or, all the
Yeah.
negative things. It's just to be like, oh, okay, there it is. That's anxiety. Okay, that's what happens sometimes in my body when I feel this or that. And so it's like more of like not judging things, just looking at what I feel and labeling it and then saying, okay, and then breathe and then remind myself of truths. So I feel like that's the biggest thing that I've learned. And it's funny because it started out learning it just clinically in grad school. And now I'm like, oh, now I actually have to utilize these that I tell clients to do because it's happened and it's real. And that is, I don't know, like, I don't think God makes things happen to us, but I think like this, but I think I can use it. I think I can learn from it and be like, I know exactly what that feels like. I know exactly what a panic attack feels like and have more empathy for people in general.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, this reminds me of I recently recorded with a woman, Anna Donaldson, and she wrote a book called A Rare Bird, or no, not A Rare Bird, just Rare Bird. And it was about losing her son, and he was 12 and he drowned in a creek by their house. And so basically, I mean, but she kind of talks about the same thing about kind of there'll be a period in time where you kind of beat yourself up and you think like, what if I did this, or what if this happens, or what if I had done that? And then she talks about kind of overcoming that process and that you can't do that to yourself because there's a lot of things you don't have control over. But it definitely gave me perspective, and also kind of like I remember after interviewing her, and after reading her book, I would cry. Like I was just bawling, putting my kid down because ultimately I don't have control. But I feel like the thing that I've learned the most is to just like love them every day and to pour everything that I have into them and to enjoy them, because if I spend too much time worrying about the future, then I'm going to miss what's happening right now.
Yeah, exactly. I've learned that definitely, like the present moment. I think I wrote that in an email to you about the book, Present Over Perfect by Shawn Nyquist, that I like really resonated with that book because I want so badly to savor the present moment. And it's hard in itself, and it's not possible to do every day, all day, but to be more aware of it, that like this is what we have. And that is actually a very big tool in dealing with anxiety that I've learned to help me is like, okay, because anxiety is living in the future. I feel like it's living in the future and things that haven't even happened. That's been my experience. And so when I come back to the present moment, whether I'm on an airplane or doing something else that gives me anxiety, I remind myself like, nope, this is what's happening right here. I'm okay. Like nothing, the horrible things in my mind that I think are going to happen aren't happening right now. So yeah, coming back to the present moment is huge, and definitely helpful in dealing with anxiety.
Well, that is like the perfect leeway into the next few questions that I wanted to ask you. But before I ask you those, I just want to thank you and acknowledge you for being like such a transparent Instagrammer and a blogger, because I feel like sometimes we get caught up in this like comparison between strangers that are on social media because their pictures are beautiful and you have beautiful pictures, but then when you read your captions, that's like real life and you share real life and you're not afraid to talk to people. And I appreciate that because, like for me, and I know for other moms, like we need to be reminded that we're not alone, and and that we all struggle the same thing. So man, you're doing an awesome job and I appreciate you.
That means so much to me because it's a huge compliment to hear that because I feel like that's really what I strive for. Like the art side of me and the creative person in me wants to create beautiful things, but then at the same time, I'm like, I overall want to be a person that doesn't make anybody else feel bad. about themselves or their lives. I just want to inspire and encourage. So I feel like maybe the mixture with, of words with the images, and my real life stories, that maybe that's the healthy balance of it all. And I'm so glad that you think that. So thank you.
So I wanted to ask you, if you could pick the most influential book that you've read, what would it be?
Right now, I would have to say Heart Made Whole by Krista Black Gifford. I just finished it and I want to pick it up and read it again. Yeah, I feel like it just helped me um, with so many things, like so many different, like it's really, the book is about um, healing yourself, or not healing yourself, but how to deal with unhealed pain in your life. And ultimately, it's God that does that. And she talks in the book about her traumas and how she didn't let it destroy her. She lost a daughter in childbirth, and she talks about her experience of how she walked through with God so intimately through that experience of trauma. And for me, like, so much of anxiety is like, what would I be, or how would I respond if something like that happened to me? And the way she talked about it was just so comforting to someone who hasn't experienced that trauma, but, is afraid of things. And it was just like, wow, that's the kind of God we, have, is one that is a loving father that wants to, like, hold us in those moments where we're in pain. But yeah, I just loved how she wrote about her personal story, but just also how she dealt with unhealed pain in your lives. Because we all have it. We all have it from childhood, and,
Yeah.
Different experiences in life that has made us tell ourselves different, negative stories or wrong stories about ourselves. But yeah, I love that book so much. I like gifted it already to a couple people because I'm like, this is so good. So yeah, and actually I really liked in the book, after each chapter, she calls it heart
Uh-huh.
surgery, and she asks these deep questions. And I journaled every time about them, and I answered them. And I feel like maybe that was the meat of it. Maybe that's why I loved it so much. It actually helped me do some heart surgery on myself, like asking myself, like, why do I think that, or how do I, what do I think about this? So it was really good. Yeah, heart made whole.
Man, women are like such warriors. When I think about her and her book, and then, just what you've overcome and what you're doing, and then all the women that I've interviewed, I'm just like, we are some crazy, awesome warriors. Like, we all have different things that we've overcome, and it's so awesome. Anyway.
Yeah.
If you could empower women in one way, what would it be?
I would want women to know that they're enough, that they're good enough, like pretty enough, smart enough, lovely enough, like that they, are worthy of what they want to do and what they want to have. But yeah, I think enough is the word that comes to mind of what I would want women to know. And then I would also want them to know, like, if you want to do something, do it. Don't wait till, like, you feel like you're good enough. Like, if you want to take photos and be a photographer, do it. If you want to start a blog and write, do it. If you want to work part-time because that's going to give you joy, being a barista while having children or whatever, do it. Like, I feel like life is too short to wait for things to, like, be perfect. Or to wait to feel like you're good enough. With blogging, oh my gosh, I started and I didn't even know what I was doing, but, like, I have learned along the way. And I still don't know half the time what I'm doing, but it's just fun. It's fun learning, and I'm so glad that I have that as an outlet. And I've talked to so many different women that are like, well, I want to do it, but so many people are doing it, or, I want to do this, but I don't know how. Just YouTube it, Google it. Like, literally, that's how I figure out some of the things.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Like, I Google all the time,
Yes.
or YouTube things. So yeah, I would just let women know that they, if you have a desire for something, it's probably because you're supposed to be doing something in that field or realm of, whatever that desire is. So do it, start it. That's what I would say.
If you could tell your younger self one thing, assuming that she would listen, what would it be?
Oh my gosh, this is such a good question. I would tell myself you're okay. Like you're okay and you're gonna be okay. Yeah, I think every phase of my life I can look back and, from having an eating disorder in college to, being worried that I was never going to meet my husband to then being worried that like I would never figure out what I wanted to do with my career. I would just tell myself like, you're okay. And it's all going to be okay.
You're so awesome. I had no idea all this. I'm like, wait, how did we not talk about all those things? No, but
I know. I'm sorry, I slipped the eating disorder.
That just goes back to that. Like, we are such warriors. Oh my gosh, yeah. We need our own like warrior bad moms remix movie or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
So, where can everybody find you on social media? Where can they read your blog and follow you? All that good stuff.
Yes. Okay. So my blog is just ChrissyPowers.com. That's ChrissyPowers.com. And then if you go there, you can see my Instagram feed and you could click on that and follow me if you want. It's Chrissy J Powers. I had to use my middle initial there. So that's
dang those other Chrissy Powers.
Those other Chrissy Powers. That's okay. I believe Twitter too, which I don't really understand Twitter, but basically my Instagram feed is on Twitter at Chrissy J Powers as well. And then I'm on like, Pinterest and Facebook at just Chrissy Powers. So yeah, that's where you guys can find me, and feel free to like reach out to me. I would love to know if you listen to this or just answer any questions you guys might have too. So
yeah, that would be awesome. And I'm also going to link your article from the Everyday Girl that's about to come out, because this episode won't air until after it comes out, and so I would love to have that in the show notes, so we can read it and share it.
Love that. Thank you.
But yeah, so thank you for hanging out with me. I'm so appreciative of it.
Yeah, this is my first podcast. I'm so stoked. I'm excited to do this. So thank you.
I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. Make sure you check out Chrissy's show notes page at todayseden.com/podcasts, PODCASTS/026. And there I will link the article that she wrote for the Everyday Girl, also her favorite books, how you can follow Chrissy on Instagram, because you guys, that is a gorgeous feed that she has created, obviously as a photographer, but it's just amazing. I love it, and I love following her. Also want to make sure that you guys are checking out the Today's Eden Tribe Facebook group. You can go to todayseden.com and go to the top menu bar, click Today's Eden Tribe, and there you can join our Facebook group where we kind of hang out and talk about real stuff just like we do on here, but with each other. Lastly, if you've been listening into this podcast and you've been enjoying it, I just want to let you know that I truly appreciate you, and I honestly want to get to know every single one of you, so I hope you do join the Facebook group. But I ask that you share this podcast with your friends or your family, anybody who you think that might benefit from joining us in the conversations that we're having, whether it be on the podcast or in the Facebook group. And I also would love it if you could leave a review or a rating on iTunes. You guys, that is how people can find my podcast better, is by giving it a rating, so that way iTunes makes this podcast more visible on the podcast lists, and in turn, more women get to hear these awesome stories from these awesome women that are sharing their journeys on this podcast. And the quote I want to leave with you today is, motherhood is a choice you make every day to put someone else's happiness and well-being ahead of your own, to teach the hard lessons, to do the right thing even when you're not sure what is the right thing, and to forgive yourself over and over again for doing everything wrong. Thanks for listening, and I hope you guys tune in again next Wednesday.